In the video that I made, or videos about Antonio Damasio, looking at the function of emotions regarding intellectual functionings, as a brief recap, one can say that if there was damage to the prefrontal cortex, that secondary emotions were eliminated. Essentially, secondary emotions would be those that derive from intellectual awareness, so that if you were aware that someone has done you wrong, then you would experience secondary emotions if your prefrontal cortex was intact. If it was not, then you would have the intellectual understanding that these emotions should be experienced, but you would not have a physiological response in your body or mind regarding these emotions. And what Damasio essentially found was that intellectually, people that had their prefrontal cortex destroyed could function intellectually up to a point, but then when the amount of information became too large or was separated in time by too great a distance, that normal individuals would mark information, tag them, and this is the somatic marker hypothesis of Damasio. And by tagging them, this would give a sense of importance to various ideas which could not be contained within consciousness because the essential size of consciousness was limited. In this video, I'd like to explore the opposite direction, specifically what would happen if emotions are exaggerated. I wish to talk about manic psychosis, which I've experienced, and also psychedelic states of consciousness. As a brief qualifier regarding doing drugs like LSD or psilocybin or mescaline, I've done the first two, not the latter. I think it's accurate to say that taking these drugs is a lot like riding a motorcycle without a helmet. If you've never taken them before and your motorcycle is defective in some way, there's a good chance you will, on the first trip, get permanent brain damage. On the other hand, if your motorcycle is intact, then there is a risk each time you ride the motorcycle that you will suffer some brain damage, or perhaps wipe out and take a few days to recover. However, even if you've ridden that motorcycle many, many times, especially if you ride it faster, as in taking a higher dose, the risk will go up with higher doses, and there is no guarantee that you won't have permanent damage done at any particular time, even though you've gone out in that motorcycle many times. So where the risk might be small riding a motorcycle without a helmet, if your motorcycle is intact and you don't go too fast, there is always a risk, and that risk is rather serious, because you will be unable to function as a normal human being should you receive an injury of that type. Okay, well, let's just start off with manic psychoses. There are different levels of this, but the important thing about this is you experience, when you're in a manic state, very pronounced emotions, generally of elation and self-confidence. This leads to some interesting effects, and those effects change depending on the level of the mania. Certainly there is adulterating factors here, because with both the state of manic psychosis and with psychedelic drugs, there's more than just emotions involved. There's also alterations in brain functioning that have more variables than just removing or having a stroke or brain damage in the prefrontal cortex. So these would be hypothesis as well, but they're less clean. So what happens, though, is that it's possible when you're in a manic state to have areas of your awareness that are operating according to normal reality testing. That is, people that are not psychotic would generally agree with you and you with them. But there are areas of delusion in which you're not just really, really sure, you're 100% sure that you're correct. Now, there's interesting parallels to this to religion, certainly, and that's going to be maybe for another video. But what happens is that you could believe that you could cure somebody of brain cancer by taking a gun and shooting them in the head, having the brain tumor fly out, and you would be 100% sure that you would not injure them in any way. In fact, that you would cure them permanently of brain cancer. It's possible, and I've experienced delusions of this kind. Now, the thing about this is that you can go about purchasing that gun, and you can go about purchasing the bullets and making plans to meet them, and everything about the process of purchasing these items and meeting them can be operating along the lines that everyone would think would be perfectly normal, except that one delusion. Now, if you get to higher levels of mania, the delusions become less stable, and they alternate very rapidly. But if you're at a certain level of mania, it's possible to have long-lasting delusions of this sort. Now, as a hypothesis, one could say that it's possible, and be interesting to explore this possibility, that you are experiencing profound sense of emotions, of elations, of abilities and certainties in your abilities, and that when these emotions get tagged with certain ideas, you're able to say, these ideas are right, and you lose the rational part that says, wow, these are crazy, even though there's another part of you that has the ability to think rationally. For instance, and I've done this, I have been psychotic and played very good chess. Now, not the same game I normally played, quite erratic and strange, but my thinking is still there, even though I have delusions. Now, I'm not speaking of other types of psychosis, just manic psychosis that I have experienced, and perhaps people that are bipolar have different variations of this. But the interesting connection I'm just trying to draw here is, it's possible that these exaggerated sense of emotions essentially become tagged with certain ideas which then become delusions, and at this point rationality is thrown out the window. In a sense, with Damasio, the prefrontal cortex is gone, and you lose the ability to handle long, complex intellectual functions, or functions that are extended over time, because you can't hold that into awareness. If you go in the opposite direction, if you tag ideas with strong emotion, perhaps that too can cause intellectual impairment, but of a different sort, one in which you cease to evaluate the rationality behind your choices and your beliefs. Now, this also ties together with psychedelic experiences. In psychedelic experiences, what happens is that, well, one thing that happens, they're very complex, is that you have a sense of enormous profundity and importance to ideas. For example, Aldous Huxley, when he took mescaline, had the experience that he had come up with something quite amazing, and he wrote it down, and it was higamus, hogamus, woman is monogamous, hogamus, higamus, man is polygamous. Of course, after his mescaline trip, he looked at it and said, well, that's nonsense. But if the idea is more complex, and I've got about a minute left, I'm going to keep this under a minute. For instance, if the idea is socialism, if the idea is libertarianism, if the idea is past lives, if the idea is using LSD to transform the world, anything with a high degree of complexity, what happens is that it's harder to ascertain when you come down that you may have been wrong, because your consciousness cannot handle all that processing, and the emotional tags can prejudice you. So I could probably go on for a lot longer, but I'm running out of my 10 minutes, so perhaps I'll make another video on this. I certainly got plenty of ideas. Get back with you later. Take care, folks.